Well, good morning and welcome to Greek Morphology, Greek Study Tools for Arlington Baptist University. This is the first lecture, if you will, on our 8-week journey through the New Testament. A couple of notes at the very beginning, and I'm going to get into our first lecture, which is on the repetitive use of words and thematic use of words. I would encourage you, as a matter of fact, it's 25% of your grade, to get a binder of some kind. I have an example of one of mine here. This is my binder for the overall program at Arlington. The reason I have this binder, and I have it tabbed, as you can see, it's got my notes in it, is that every week, actually every one of the 16 lectures, I'll be providing for you some notes. Sometimes it's just one page, sometimes it'll be 2 or 3, but I won't overwhelm you with the notes. But those notes are going to be hole punched and put into your notebook, and that at the completion of the class, at the completion of this 8-week class, hopefully you will have the resources and the materials and your own notes that you could build what I hope to be a myriad of sermons, a myriad of lessons, all based on the tools that we talk about, the tools that we provide. So I would encourage you to get a binder, just any old binder, and make it your own for the next 8 weeks. Secondly, we're going to begin using some websites. And as you heard me say at the very outset, I am passionate about the fact that the Bible is supposed to be free. And so every one of these websites that we're going to be discussing are free and are, at the time of this lecture, available to anyone. The one that I've used right here at the very beginning, at the very outset, is one called BibleStudyTools.com. So that's plural, BibleStudyTools.com. It is also one that I'll refer to on a number of occasions when I do word studies, because I think they have one of the best interlinear methods, simplest interlinear methods that you could use. The third thing that I want to tell you is that at the end of every lecture, I provide something simple that indicates that you were listening, that you paid attention through the whole class, and that whatever I ask you to turn in, it's an indicator that you went to the very end of that lecture. That's all. That's why I do it. So I just wanted to get that point out there and get it ready for you. And so, if you will, take your notes that I've put out here, patterns of use in the Greek New Testament. Yes? One of the most interesting things about the Greek language is that the Koine Greek, that goes back 2,000 years, is one of the more consistent languages through time. In the last 2,000 years, not much has changed between Koine Greek, which was the average person's Greek, and modern Greek. There are a few things that have changed. There's a few things that may be different, but the alphabet has not changed. The grammar is a little simpler. Accentuation, the use of accents and such is a little bit simpler. The only other change that you have may be the voice. In biblical Greek, there's a middle voice. Active voice and passive voice. As it was done to someone or someone was doing. Middle voice is a reflexive, and often indicates thought, that they reconsidered, that they thought something else, or that they were thinking about themselves. So in the middle voice, that's really not in the modern Greek. So Greek is a language that, it's pretty consistent. I like that. It's also very, very vivid in that it has a very deep morphology behind every term and every word. Interestingly enough, and this is a point that I'm going to ask you to think about and chew on, there are only 12 verses in the Greek New Testament, 12, that are written in what we call High Greek or Literary Greek. That is the language of the writers and the philosophers, the Onyx, etc., Stoics, Plato. So there's only 12 verses in the entire New Testament that are written in High Greek. Here's what's interesting. The first 4 verses of Luke, the first 4 verses of Acts, and the first 4 verses of Hebrews. Do with that what you will. David Allen seems to think, Dr. David Allen from Southwestern Seminary, David Allen seems to think that that indicates that Luke was the author of Hebrews. I've always indicated that I thought it was Paul, and Luke may have translated it into Greek, but if you write into the Hebrews, I think it would have been written in, Hebrew. But nonetheless, I mean, that's just a fight for another day. Other than that, however, one of the things I want to point out in this lecture is something called thematic repetition. Thematic repetition, if you look at the notes, here's what I've listed out for you. The Greek New Testament is thematic interpretation or repetition in the Greek New Testament is the continued use of a phrase, a citation, specific words that indicates an ongoing theme in a book. And it also indicates, in a different way, the audience to which it's being written. So, as an example, I have listed for you probably the most common one, the one that you would know more about than anything, and that is the 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I happen to hold that Matthew was the first one written. Papias indicates that Matthew was written around 45 to 50 AD. I think it seems to be, the classic view that Mark was the first one written because it's smaller. That's neither here nor there to me. That's not evidence. That's just they're trying to look for some sort of a pattern in history. But if you're writing something to reach the Old Testament saints, and if you're writing something to reach the Old Testament followers, the Jews, one would think that Matthew would be first because it's the one that cites the Old Testament fulfilled prophecy. As a matter of fact, that's the phrase that I point out in the book of Matthew, and that is, you constantly see the phrase, that it might be fulfilled. Blah, 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 comma, that it might be fulfilled. The next thing that is probably of importance is that the use of Old Testament citation in Matthew, always over and over, very carefully, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, he says, and Jesus did this, that it might be fulfilled. Or he will say that, he did this, comma, as is found in Isaiah. And he gives the Old Testament citation. It makes sense that Matthew, writing to a Jewish audience, would constantly use Jewish citations. Old Testament, the law, the prophets, and the writings. Different than Mark. Mark is constantly emphasizing Christ as action, Christ as hero. Mark is much more interested in the verbs, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, much more interested in the action. And the use of a phrase immediately, or straight away in the King James, is something that I'll come back to in a moment. Mark gives the idea of Christ as servant, and Christ as the fulfiller of deeds, the worker of healing, and etc. I think that Mark, writing to a Roman audience that was there in Jerusalem, that was an audience that was very local. They knew what was taking place. And so when he cites it, he cites it in a way where he says, and then Jesus went here, and then Jesus went there, as you people know. Luke is writing to the Greeks. Now, the reason we say that is because his method there is a philosophical phrase, the Son of Man. Now, it's also an Old Testament phrase that is a citation of Daniel. It's a citation of Christ as Messiah. But it's Christ as Messiah for an intellectual people, for a people that would know that, like I said, the Greeks or those who were Hellenistic in their thinking, who understood when you say Son of Man, you were talking about the fulfillment of Christ as both the Son of God and the Son of Man, and that he is here doing this work. And the method, the second reason I think that it's written to the Greek audience, is that the method that Luke uses is question and answer. Question and answer. Either through Jesus himself speaking, when he gives the citation of what Jesus did, or you can read it in his actual narrative. It's question and answer. Why did Jesus do this? Oh, well, Jesus did this as the Son of Man. Jesus did this as the fulfillment of the messianic prophecy. Contrast that with what Mark does, because Mark, it's the messianic secret. Every time Jesus healed somebody, every time Jesus did something, in Mark he says, shh, don't tell anybody. And the reason he does that is because they already knew, well, the people who lived in the Roman world already knew, but there was a messianic secret, as opposed to in Luke, where it is a proclamation of him. The Son of Man is doing this, Jesus as fulfilling. So if you've got the Matthean emphasis to the Jew, Mark, emphasis to the Roman, Luke, emphasis to the Greek, and of course the use of those 4 verses in Luke and Acts, Theophilus, right? In John writes his to an audience of the world, anyone who can read. And his presentation of Jesus Christ is Jesus Christ who is God. You constantly see the citation of Jesus, probably the most famous one, John 8:58, where he says, I am. I am, the Yahweh. He uses the tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton, as you know, are the 4 letters for the name of God. Yod, He, Vav, He. And in so using that immediately caused the Jews to try to stone him. And in John 8:58, of course, they did. They tried to stone him because he was declaring himself to be Jehovah. He was declaring himself to be God. The unspoken name of God, the self designation that God uses for himself. Even when Moses says, who shall I say send me? Tell him I am sent you. Yod, He, Vav, He. And so in John, he presents a philosophical argument. If Jesus is who he said he is, he's God and he's man. He's light who came. He didn't come to be God. He was God before he left. And that's the use of the phrase I am, the method of philosophy. The last thing I want to come back to is a methodology in the Greek whereby someone uses a phrase or a word constantly. If you remember, we did the in Christ from the writings of Paul from last week, and thank you for turning in your papers on that. But we're now going to close. I'm going to close the lecture by asking you to help me in a citation in Mark. The term is eutheos, E-U-T-H-E-O-S, eutheos. It's the word for immediately. Now, of all the usages in the New Testament, Matthew uses it 15 times. Let me make sure I give you right. Yeah, Matthew 15 times, Luke does it 8 times, John does it 4 times. Mark uses that word straight away 40 times. So at the bottom of the page, I've given you, I think, ample space, but I would like you to search and cite the 40 times in the Gospel of Mark that he uses that phrase, immediately, dot, 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 immediately, dot, dot, dot. And if you would, just, give me a word or 2 after that. Immediately he walked, immediately he ran, immediately whatever. Here's why. I have the belief, and I hold to a position here based on the Greek, that Mark is the action-oriented gospel. That Mark is the gospel that you can trust because young kids can read it, and it reads like an action novel. He's constantly going. Christ is constantly serving. He's constantly working. And in so doing, I think that Mark, literally, it's only used, that word is only used 80 times in the New Testament. Half of them are in the Gospel of Mark. So if you will, write them, cite them down. You can handwrite it or type it. The 40 different times he says the phrase immediately. Whatever comes after that. You don't have to write the long phrase after that. Just enough to indicate what and where. So we'll come back. We have covered we'll talk to you later. Have a great day in the Lord.